They say kindness costs nothing, but for Shanice Williams it cost everything. At least that was what she thought on a quiet night in Charlotte, North Carolina. As a single mother, she always followed the rules to the letter. But that night, she made an exception. She served a late customer, a man wearing a baseball cap. What she didn't know was that this simple act of kindness was being watched. What she didn't know was that she would be fired the next morning. What she didn't know was that this would be the beginning of the biggest turnaround of her life. That day, Shanice was at her usual post in Jerry's diner, refilling the sugar dispensers while the clock on the wall showed 11:45 p.m. There were only 15 minutes left before the restaurant closed, and her muscles were begging for rest after 10 hours of non-stop work. But she couldn't stop yet, not when destiny depended on her. "Mommy, can I go to basketball camp this summer?" Destiny asked that morning, her brown eyes shining with hope. "Coach said I'm getting really good." The memory of her 8-year-old daughter's excited smile gave Shanice the energy she needed. The basketball camp cost $500, 2 weeks of double shifts. But seeing Destiny talk about the sport with so much enthusiasm made it all worthwhile. The bell above the door rang, bringing Shanice back to reality. She turned to inform the new customer that they were about to close, but the words died in her throat. A tall man, wearing a dark jacket and a baseball cap, entered, bowing his head to avoid hitting the door frame. Even leaning, he still seemed almost 2 meters tall. Brad, the manager, had always been strict about serving customers after 11:30 p.m. "The kitchen closes early," he constantly repeated. No exceptions. But something in that man's tired eyes made Shanice hesitate. He seemed to have had a day as long as hers. "Come in," she said impulsively, grabbing a menu from the counter. "Try to order quickly. The kitchen is about to close." The man smiled, and his eyes lit up warmly. "Thank you," he said, his voice deep and calm. "I just need a place to eat and think." Shanice led him to a secluded booth, away from the windows. She noticed he kept his head down, as if he wanted to avoid being recognized. Probably a basketball player, she thought. Charlotte was always full of tall athletes, especially during the season. "What can I get for you?" she asked, picking up the notepad. "Black coffee," he replied. "And what do you recommend for dinner?" "Our chicken and waffles are quite famous," Shanice said with a smile. "My daughter says they're the best in town, although she might be a bit biased since her mother makes them." The man laughed, a familiar sound that made Shanice frown for a moment. "Sounds perfect," he replied. "Do you have children?" she asked as she wrote down the order. "No, but I like hearing stories about dreamer kids." Shanice smiled. "My daughter is 8 years old and already taller than half the class. She loves basketball. She wants to play in the WNBA someday." "Noble dream," the man responded, nodding slightly. His cap moved with the gesture, and for a moment, Shanice caught a glimpse of his face under the fluorescent light. Her heart raced. She knew exactly who he was. But instead of reacting, she continued as if nothing had happened. "I'll take your order," she said calmly, turning to the kitchen. Behind the counter, Jerry, the cook, was already preparing to close for the night. "Special customer," he grumbled, but he turned on the waffle machine without complaint. In all his years of service, he had never refused an order. As the food cooked, Shanice took the opportunity to clean tables and count her tips. The night's total was $83, not counting the late customer. This money would go directly to Destiny's camp fund, along with tips from her morning shift at the cafeteria where she worked. On the other side of the restaurant, the man drank his coffee, watching the empty street through the window. Despite his imposing presence, there was something about him that conveyed calm. Over the years, Shanice had served several famous athletes. Some were rude, others indifferent. But this man seemed different. When the plate was ready, she brought it to the table with extra napkins and a bottle of hot sauce. "Here you go. The best chicken and waffles in Charlotte," she said. "Thank you," he replied, looking at her badge. "Shanice, you didn't have to serve me so late. I know it's past hours." She shrugged. "Everyone deserves a good meal and a moment of peace, no matter the time. My mother taught me that." He nodded thoughtfully. "Your mother taught you well. Your daughter is lucky to have you. I'm the lucky one, Shanice replied. Destiny keeps me going on nights like this. She went back to work but couldn't help glancing at the security camera in the corner. Brad reviewed the tapes every morning. Maybe he wouldn't notice the timestamp, and even if he did, she wouldn't regret helping someone. The man ate calmly, making small appreciative sounds that made Shanice smile. When he finished, he waved to her. Your daughter was right, he said. The best chicken and waffles I've had in a long time. He took out his wallet before she could calculate the total and placed several bills on the table. Keep the change, he said, standing up. And thank you for the kindness. It means more than you realize. Shanice waited until he left before counting the tip. Her eyes widened at the stack of $100 bills. 5 of them. It was more than enough to pay for Destiny's camp. Locking up the restaurant at 12:30 a.m., Shanice felt strangely light despite her fatigue. Sometimes breaking the rules was worth it, especially when her heart said it was the right thing to do. What she didn't know was that her act of kindness had not gone unnoticed, and that the next morning her life would change forever. Inside a black SUV pulling away from the curb, Michael Jordan smiled, already planning his next move. Morning arrived quickly. The alarm clock rang at 6 a.m., and Shanice groaned, her muscles still sore from last night's shift. But remembering the $500 tip in her purse, a smile formed on her face. She stretched, trying to ignore the exhaustion, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Destiny, time to wake up, she called down the hall of the small apartment. Her daughter appeared shortly after, already dressed in her school basketball uniform, dribbling an imaginary ball. Mommy, guess what? She said excitedly. Coach Johnson said I can be team captain. Shanice's heart swelled with pride. That's amazing, honey. And guess what else? She said, trying to contain her excitement. I think the basketball camp is happening after all. Destiny's eyes sparkled. But yesterday you said we didn't have money. Let's just say a kind customer left a very generous tip last night, Shanice said as she began making pancakes. She smiled as she added chocolate chips, forming a design that resembled a basketball. Sometimes good things happen when you least expect them. The morning routine flew by. After dropping Destiny off at school, Shanice headed to Jerry's diner for her daytime shift. She hadn't even managed to enter when Brad's cold voice stopped her. My office, now. Shanice's heart raced. Brad was standing with his arms crossed, his expression stern. On the computer screen, the security camera footage from the previous night played on a loop. The timestamp clearly showed 11:47 p.m. Care to explain this? He asked, pointing to the screen. Shanice swallowed hard. Brad, he just needed a meal, she tried to argue. You know the rules, no customers after 11:30 p.m. But he wasn't causing any trouble. He just wanted to eat in peace. Brad shook his head. What if he was a thief? What if something had happened? Insurance doesn't cover incidents after closing. Nothing happened, Brad. He was just hungry and nothing, Brad interrupted, hardening his gaze. I warned you about this before, about making exceptions, staying late and giving extra portions to people who say they're hungry. Shanice's face flushed. Those people were hungry, and last night's customer was Michael Jordan. Brad let out a mocking laugh. Oh, of course, and I'm LeBron James. He shook his head. That was the last straw, Shanice. I need your apron and badge. The realization hit her. You're firing me for helping someone. Her voice faltered. You have a daughter to support, Brad continued, impassive. I know, Shanice replied, and that's why I work so hard. You should have thought about that before breaking the rules. Badge, now. With trembling hands, she removed her identification badge. 8 years of service ended coldly and impersonally. As she walked to her car, trying to hold back tears, her phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Is this Shanice Williams? A formal voice asked on the other end of the line. Yes. Who is this? I'm calling on behalf of Mr. Michael Jordan. He would like to meet with you this morning at the Charlotte Hornets office. Are you available? The shock was so great, she almost dropped the phone. She looked back, seeing Brad watching her through the restaurant window, arms crossed. I think so, she replied, her heart pounding. May I ask what it's about? Mr. Jordan will explain everything in person. Can you be here in 30 minutes? Shanice looked at the clock on the car dashboard. Yes, she said without hesitation. I'll be there. As she drove toward downtown Charlotte, her mind was racing. Was this a mistake? Was she deluding herself? But deep down, something told her that this moment was different. At the top of the imposing Hornets Tower, Michael Jordan reviewed a detailed dossier on Shanice Williams. 8 years at the same restaurant. A second job to support his daughter. Volunteer work at the community center. Perfect. As soon as she arrives, send her straight to me, he told his assistant. He took the phone and dialed another number. Call the foundation board and say I think we've found the right person. Meanwhile, in the building's parking lot, Shanice was still gripping the steering wheel tightly, trying to calm the whirlwind of emotions inside her. Her phone buzzed with a message from Maria, her co-worker at Jerry's diner. We tried to talk to Brad, but he doesn't want to listen. We'll miss you. Shanice felt a lump in her throat. 8 years of friendships, loyal customers who felt like family, all over. But before tears could fall, she whispered to herself, "Pull yourself together. Destiny needs you to be strong." There was still rent to pay, food to put on the table, and now a mysterious meeting with Michael Jordan. She looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her waitress uniform was still immaculate. Present yourself with dignity, no matter what life throws at you. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Taking one last deep breath, she exited the car and walked into the building. In the lobby, with its marble and gleaming glass, she felt completely out of place. "I'm Shanice Williams. I received a call about a meeting with Mr. Jordan." The security guard raised his eyebrows, surprised, and quickly made a call. A few seconds later, he handed her a visitor's badge. 43rd floor, Patricia will meet you in the elevator." The elevator ride felt endless. Her mind raced with questions. Why did Michael Jordan want to talk to her? Was it about last night? Was he upset that she pretended not to recognize him? As soon as the doors opened, an elegant woman in her 50s greeted her. "Ms. Williams, welcome. I'm Patricia. Can I offer you something? Water, coffee?" "Water would be great," she replied automatically. Patricia led her to a comfortable waiting room with huge windows overlooking the city. From up there, Jerry's diner looked small and insignificant, just as she felt at that moment. "Mr. Jordan will see you shortly," Patricia said before leaving. Alone, Shanice took out her cell phone. A new message from Destiny. "Practice was amazing. Coach said I'm getting great at 3-point shots. Love you, Mummy." A smile appeared on her face. That's when the door opened. "Ms. Williams?" The voice was deep, unmistakable. Shanice stood up and turned to face Michael Jordan in person. He was no longer wearing the baseball cap. Now he was there, right in front of her, and with a smile on his face he extended his hand to greet her. "Thank you for coming so quickly." Shanice took a deep breath before shaking Michael Jordan's hand. "I hope you don't mind that I pretended not to recognize you yesterday," she said. Jordan smiled. "That was exactly what I needed." He then handed her a folder. "This is a job offer. I want you to lead a program in my foundation. Someone who sees people beyond the rules." Shanice looked at the document, moved. "Why me?" "Because you already do this work, you just need a title." She smiled. "Then I think I accept. If this story inspired you, leave a like and share.